Greetings, Inderes TV viewers and listeners. Nordea published its second quarter results today. I'm interviewing Nordea Group CFO Ian Smith here at Vallila headquarters. Ian, how are you?
I'm very well, Verneri, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How was Nordea's results in the second quarter? What were the highlights?
So I think Nordea had another good quarter. Our return on equity was 17.9%, which I think will be one of the strongest in Europe. And indeed, our return on equity for the first half of the year was 18%. And remember, our target is to be above 15% this year. So really good progress on that. I would say that particularly pleasing is that we continue to post strong net interest income. But also one of the highlights this time was that we had higher fee and commission income. And some of that came from a better performance in our savings business, savings investment, and then also quite high levels of transactions with our corporate customers.
Do I recall correctly that your assets under management reached 400 billion euros?
Yes, they did. So they increased by 10% year on year to 400 billion euros.
Net interest income increased, as you said, but of course the net interest margin is going slightly down. So how do you see the development going forward?
Yeah, actually we held our net interest margin at 1.83% this year, this quarter, which is similar to what it's been in the last two quarters, and I guess reflects that we've seen the sort of peak of the interest rate cycle. And indeed, in May and June, we saw the first interest rate cuts, first in Sweden, and then in Finland and Denmark. So I think it's fair to say that we'll see our net interest margin reduce a little bit over coming quarters. But Nordea should be pretty resilient. It has a good balanced business and a good mix of deposits between transactions and savings accounts. So I think we should see resilient net interest income this year, and then perhaps a little bit down next year, as everyone in the market will expect.
If the economy improves, should the growing low volume also compensate the decreasing net income margin over time?
Yeah, I think that there will be a benefit from increased volumes, I'm sure. And also, as interest rates come down, I think we'll see some confidence return, which will make people, first of all, feel better about borrowing money. And I hope that will bring some energy to the housing market. And then secondly, we should see overall levels of activity improve as well as people feel confident to go out and do deals and other things.
Exactly. One topic we usually have is the non-existent loan losses. In previous interviews, I always say that I need a magnifier to see them. That this time I could see with my own eyes. The loan losses were 8 basis points. If I recall correctly, there were some provisions because of a few large corporate customers. What were driving those loan losses? What's your comment?
Yeah, so a little bit higher than we've seen over the last few quarters, but still at a pretty low level. Remember, our guidance is that in normal times, Nordea should have around 10 basis points of loan losses. So at 8 basis points, we're still below that. And this was driven by a small number of specific cases amongst our corporate customers in business banking. And you can imagine that some of the stresses and strains that we've seen in the economy with higher interest rates, with lower demand and other things, that will put some pressure on certain businesses. And so we've seen a couple of instances where customers have got into difficulty. Now, these are provisions. We don't we haven't lost money, but we think it's prudent to reserve. But overall, still at a level below our long-term expectations.
You also did a 30 million euros management judgment release because of improved economic outlook. Could you provide some color for that?
Yeah, so every quarter we sit down and we look at the shape of the loan book. We look at what's happening in the economy in terms of growth and interest rates, unemployment, inflation, those kinds of things. And overall, those indicators look more favorable for coming years. And what that means is that when we then sort of simulate a stress on the portfolio, those better conditions mean that the provisioning need is lower. And so as a consequence, we've been able to release some of those provisions.
I'd like to how do you manage your loan book? I mean, how centralized is that? That do you weave it from top down that we should have this amount of mortgages or industrial loans, or on the other hand, is it decentralized? Like I think some of your competitors work in a very decentralized way that the loan officers themselves can decide what they loan and the loan books, and it looks what it looks. But how centralized is Nordea way of managing the loan book?
So I think that, first of all, lending to customers is around 350 billion of a 600 billion balance sheet. So it's the biggest risk that we seek to manage, I guess, in terms of credit risk. We set, first of all, limits for different types of lending, because the most important discipline in credit management is to avoid large concentrations. Diversification of risk is absolutely key. So we set limits as to how much we might have in housing, how much we have in particular industries, those kinds of things. And then our businesses work within those limits. We also have, in terms of centralization, we set policies in terms of what is required to be able to lend money to customers, whether that be to a customer that wants to buy a house, and some affordability testing policies so that they can repay, or other requirements for corporate customers. And then after that, it's down to our people on the ground. So our people on the ground will, first of all, it's important to be skilled and experienced, and we have quite a lot of experience in Nordea, particularly on the corporate side. And then those skilled practitioners, they're part of, first of all, making lending proposals, and then another group of people for approving them within the policies and frameworks. So very important to get the shape correct at a group level, on a centralized level, and then people on the ground that are closest to the customers are involved in the decision making.
Interesting. How happy you are with the loan book, how it looks today? I think in the past 10 years, de-risking has been the main theme. You decreased risk in oil and gas, or you don't have that much commercial real estate exposure. But how happy you are with the loan book composition today?
I think that the way we've shaped the loan book has stood us very well, particularly in more difficult times. You need to have the right sort of composition of loans coming into a more difficult period. You can't do much about it when you're in it. So I think we're pretty happy. It's good that we are focused on our 4 Nordic home markets, so we don't have exposure outside those, and then a good balance between household and corporate. So I think we're in good shape.
Then lastly, Danish authorities filed a formal charge regarding old weak anti-money laundering processes in Nordea. Nordea has been investing heavily in anti-money laundering and financial crimes, but how have risk and cost evolved over the years?
So I think that, first of all, yes, you're right. We're about to enter court proceedings in Denmark, and this is a very old case. And so we hope that gets resolved through the court process. We've invested heavily, as you say, both in terms of expenditure, in terms of financial investment, but also people. We have now 3,400 people out of total 30,000 in Nordea focused on financial crime prevention. And the requirements keep changing. First of all, the nature of the problems can change in society. I think fraud globally is one of the challenges that's faced by societies more generally, and I think investing to protect our customers is very important to us. And then, as you say, the rules around sanctions and anti-money laundering, they keep increasing all the time, whether that be the number of countries that need to be on the watch carefully list, or the requirements to continually update your understanding of your customers and things like that, the so-called KYC rules. All of that keeps changing, and that requires us to invest heavily, which we've done. We take it very, very seriously.
Do you see those investments grow also in the future? Now it's 10% of the workforce works with compliance. Do you see that growing even more over time?
So I don't see that there will be an easing of the focus on anti-money laundering. I think for us, an important development will be to be able to automate some of those processes, to make them quicker, to make them easier, and require fewer people. And over time, we'll try and automate as much as we can, and then manage down the number of people that we have involved in it. But it's still a big part of our business, and it's very important for Nordea to remain safe and trusted.
Exactly. Thanks, Ian, for an interesting interview.
My pleasure, and really good to see you.